You ready to go?
My name is Ryne Phillips. I'm a senior agricultural mechanization and business major. I spent the summer in Pillion, South Carolina. Many of y'all might not know where that is, outside of Lexington. I work with Walter P. Rawl and Sons. They're a large production, commercial vegetable production company, completely vertical integrated from the planting into the transportation and selling it, whole network. From the ground to the store, they control all of it. I'm going to kind of go over some brief history, a little bit of what the company produces, who some of their major buyers are, what my role was in the company, and then a little bit about, I work with sweet corn, so I'm going to kind of touch on some of those production processes and kind of how I played into that production. Walter P. Rawl and Sons started in Gilbert, South Carolina around 1926, started by Walter P. Rawl himself. Originally started as a small peach and canning operation. Now they completely wiped all the vegetable, or all the fruit and canning, strictly vegetables. Primarily just leafy greens, that's their major product. They do some other products, I'll touch on what some of those are. And we'll kind of cover some of those topics. Like I said earlier, commercial production, the no roadside markets, nothing like that. Straight to Walmart, Bi-Lo, Kroger, customers like that. They're in 5 different states, 8 growing locations. Headquarters in South Carolina, Pillion, that's where I worked. They grow in Gilbert, over by, I don't know if y'all know where Titan Peach Farms, they grow over there, Ridge Spring area. I've got a map that actually shows some of their growing locations. They're continually expanding across the country. A lot of problems now is you see a lot of these campaigns thousands of miles fresher. Well, in order to make it fresher, they have to move their operation across the country. A lot of people from California might start questioning South Carolina vegetables coming 3,000 miles away, so virtually it's easier for them to move across the country, take their product to the customer instead of taking the customer to the product. Like I said earlier, completely vertical integrated, control all transportation, marketing, sales, growing. They do a little bit of outsourced contract growing when their sales increases significantly. They can't handle the amount of production, so they do have to outsource quite a bit. They try not to. They like to control all of it. They can better control the efficiencies and their price to the customer. This is a general map of their growing locations: Mississippi, Florida, New York, Virginia, South Carolina. They're looking at expanding to Texas and then out to California. Recently, this past year, they started in Mississippi. This was the first year out there. They bought a couple thousand acres out there, and it's a little bit different out there, just general ways you irrigate, plant. They have to furrow irrigate, different types of soils. Y'all probably learn about that in soils classes, irrigation. So they're having to tackle different environments, different ways to grow crops. It's an experiment. They're good at what they do in South Carolina. They can do the same in Mississippi. These are some of their major production crops. I'd say probably the number 1 or 2 crops would be collard greens. Right now they've got about 1,500 or 2,000 acres of collard greens. They do plant winter and summer collard greens. I don't know if many of y'all know, typically collard greens are cool season crops. They do have a hybrid now that grows in the summer. The yield is significantly lower, but the market's there, so they have to grow them. This top left picture is actually a field of collard greens. I took that this summer. Over here to the right, some summer squash they had growing. They do a good bit of that with Outback stores and Walmart. You got some kale down here. If y'all aren't familiar with kale, it's kind of more of a ornamental vegetable. You don't really eat it much. If you go to fancy restaurants, you'll see it on there as kind of a decoration. And then over to the right, they grow a lot of cover crops. This is peas. They don't harvest those at all. They pretty much, there's a plant in the ground 365 days out of the year. So they've got to keep that soil covered. A lot of it's sandy soils. They have a lot of problems with soil loss from wind and water, so they've got to keep the plant in the ground. And a lot of their fields are split up. They have 100-acre plots. You just split those into 4 25 acres. So they kind of tackle around that. And I've got some stuff I'm going to pass around and let y'all look at. Some field maps. And I had to basically do a comprehensive report of my work there the entire summer. Some field maps, data records, grade sheets of sweet corn I took over the summer. I had to give a presentation at the end of my internship. It was really, really beneficial. I learned a lot. Never messed with any vegetables in my entire life. I now know more than what I could ever possibly do with it. Just lightly touch on some of these other ones: cilantro, kale, parsley. A lot of these they grow summer and fall. So a lot of these plants you'll see out there 24/7, 365 days out of the year. This is just a general, very condensed list of their buyers. Walmart is probably their #1 buyer. They got them on a contract approximately 10 to 15 years ago. That's where a lot of their product goes. And if you're not familiar with how vegetable markets and fruit markets work in the commercial world, it's a little bit different. You have buyers come from the companies. They come in, they do an audit. They audit your company and decide if your product is right for their customers. So they come in, they test water quality, soil quality. They look at harvesting equipment, how you sanitize knives, anything like that. Anything in the production process they look at. And it could be 8 to 10 hour audits. They usually take an entire day. They go through the plants, take microbial samples, look for things like that. It's very, very labor intensive. They do a lot of checking. It's very difficult. Bilo, if any of y'all seen Bilo, you see Walter's Produce. That is actually not Walter P. Rawl and Sons. However, they do sell a lot. Right now, if you go in there and you look for shredded collars, just flip on the back and you can see where it's grown. It's probably grown in Pillion, South Carolina, Walter P. Rawl and Sons. Food Lion, Kroger, Winn-Dixie, Publix, Harris Teeter, all those, they grow, all of those individuals. They do not do any roadside markets, and they do not sell to just one specific person. It's usually grocery store chains and things of that nature. This is me and my responsibilities. At first, my first month there was no sweet corn. They wanted to put me into the sweet corn division. It's typically about a summer-long season. That way I could get the whole spectrum and see how everything operated. So the first month, spent a lot of time working with irrigation, PLC controllers. They do a lot with their plant. They're way out in the country, so they have to control a lot of things. They don't want to pump sewer back into Lexington County, so they have to kind of mitigate the amount of nitrogen they put back in their soil after they process their vegetables. A lot of these things I'm touching on you might not understand yet. Once you take some more classes and dive into the major, you'll understand everything, make a little bit more sense. Generally with sweet corn, I was the production supervisor, manager, whatever you wanted to call it. I was the guy that I called the shots. When it was harvested, what it was put in, when we worked, when the plant operated. Typically we worked 7 days a week, 16-hour days. I did not get very many days off. That's the only downer. But the more you work, the more experience you get. It's not all bad. You make a good bit of money. So work is always good. You always learn more. I learn more every chance I get to work. I work. I've got a lot of friends in the vegetable business, a lot of friends in row crop. They're similar, but they're very different. The more you work, the more you'll understand it. I'll kind of touch on the grading, field tests, transportation, marketing, and the general production cycle for sweet corn. For their sweet corn, everything is 100% hand harvested. Most all of their crops are hand harvested. They do have they just bought a collard processor, and it bags it, processes everything all together. One little chain. It's a machine. It takes 4 rows, 2 beds, and it comes straight out of the field and it goes to the shipping department. With me, we had a corn harvesting aid. It was not a harvester. Everything was harvested by hand, and it was thrown back on the harvester. I've got a video that will clarify how that works. So really it's more like a mule train or an aid. And we worked all day, every single day, Sunday through Sunday. Field testing, this is generally what I did. Each variety and each planting, I would go, I'd test each plots. I'd look at it, kind of look at the appearance, tip feel, husk color, shank length, how easy it was to snap. I'd taste it straight in the field raw. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was bad, but that plays a large role in it. This is a bicolor, obviously yellow corn. The only corn they grew bicolor, yellow, and white. They grew those three varieties, and they kind of play with the number of acres with each variety. These are just some pictures kind of showing. You can see the harvester here. It's a harvester. It takes 24 rows, and attached to the harvester is a hauling buggy or hauling wagon, whatever you want to call it. So it's pretty heavy. It moves very slow. You've got guys walking in front of it. 14 guys to be specific. So you kind of move slow, but you got to push the guys. Sometimes they get mad when you push them. A lot of people with knives, so you have to be calm with how you handle things. Good communication. I'm obviously not from Spanish background. I know absolutely no Spanish. I had a guy that was good at Spanish. He helped me. If it wouldn't have been for him, I probably would have got nothing accomplished. So if you can take a Spanish class, that would be very beneficial. There's some guys on the harvester, pretty good guys to work with. They like to have fun. As tough as the conditions are, they always have fun. So we harvest it from the field, goes on the harvester, we get it on the buggies. We never stop. You never stop, but probably 2 minutes to unhook a wagon and hook up a new one. They do not do any hydro cooling. For any of y'all that know what that is, they run it through a dipper, 30 minutes, chlorinated bath, about 32-degree water. Goes through there, it's a counter, they count the boxes, runs through there, goes into the plant. They don't really do much processing on the corn. They just run it through there in the boxes. They stack it, palletize it, and ship it out. Usually everything that's harvested that day, everything's sold before it's even cut. This is kind of a closer picture of the dipper. They don't really like pictures taken of their facilities. Some of it is state-of-the-art. They play with it. It's not really a general design. It's custom made to fit their applications and needs. Let's see here. Of course, my computer would mess up. It's pretty labor intensive, but if anyone, I'm going to stay afterwards, but if anybody is interested in working with this company, just come stay with me afterwards. I'll give you some contact information. There's a lot of guys I work with from Clemson, Hort, econ guys, business management. They all work together. Good group of guys, good company to work for. This is the plant, the transportation and shipping. They own about 65 commercial tractor trailers. They own the trucks, they own the trailers, they own everything. I'm going to show this video at the end if I have time. It magnifies how the operation works and makes it a little bit easier to understand. This is kind of what you'll do in 206. You have planting schedules, operation schedules. You'll touch on that, but this is how Rawl operates. They generally decide where the market is, what the demand. They'll vary the spacing, vary the row spacing, guess rows, amount of seeds per planting, different varieties. I've got some more in those booklets if you're looking at them, but they're very detailed. They keep records of everything, anything planted, anything sprayed, everything harvested. There's planting records, spraying records, harvesting records, and plant records. This is planting schedules continued. This is generally what grading and testing I would do. It's kind of based on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being perfect. Usually I wouldn't always be able to get a perfect one. You have to eyeball it. You try to figure it out. They experiment with different hybrids, different varieties, And that's where this comes into play, where they can base the next year's planting crop for the sweet corn. These are some harvest records. I've got those in those handouts if you want to take a look at those. Each pass, each box, I was there to count it, GPS, everything. I was tracking it 100% of the time. I was out there with all the guys. I did a little harvesting myself. It's some hard work. This is kind of, at the end of the season, they look at this. They have 7 plantings, when it was harvested, when it was planted, how many acres, how many boxes, and they generally look at a yield. If you're not familiar, the DTM and ADTM, days of maturity, average days of maturity, varies with planting locations, soil temperatures, planting dates. They do look at that to base their planting schedules. So that's a large roll. Obviously, the later you plant it, the more accurate it's going to be. Weather's a little bit more easy to work with. And then this is kind of generally what I would go through. Each variety, blue being bicolor, orange being white, yellow being yellow. Each variety, I have all the records, kept everything, looked at plant records. I kept records, the plant keeps records. Processing, there's a transportation and the plant, they're kind of split. So you have about 10 different records, and when you get done, you got to check all that. This is kind of breakdown of the yellow, the white, and the bicolor. And I don't know if Kendall wants me to show this video. I'll show it real quick. It's kind of cool. Completely hydraulic operated corn harvester, so Kendall will probably like it. Took hydraulics in the spring.
Did you take this video?
Yep. These guys, there's 2 to 4 guys in the front that have to cut a lane for the tractor. That's probably the hardest job of them all. They got to carry buckets back. They dump them to these wings. There's 4 or 5 guys on each wing. They each take 2 rows. They have an 8-inch knife. I was going to bring some knives in, but I don't really know how that works, being in university and everything. But I decided to leave those out. It comes in. There's usually a guy on this elevator right here. He kind of grades it and looks. If they cut it too close, you got to throw it out. Walmart will reject crops that are cut too close or cut too long. You got to pack them 48 ears a box. They want them packed perfect. I mean, Walmart's very, very tedious, and they give Walter P. Rawl guidelines for their plants. They give them an average length of the cob, average width. So it's really, you're tailoring to Walmart's needs when you do this. Now, these guys have fun. They talk on the phone. They eat. They play around. But at the end of the day, they get their work done, and they get it done right. Everybody have any questions?
I'm sure. There's no way to totally mechanize that, where you just rape it and...
They do have mechanized sweet corn harvesters, but it bruises the kernels, and Walmart does not like that. They want it all hand harvested. That's Walmart specifications.
I'm sure we'll have a lot more questions. Let's try to do, like, maybe all 3 of y'all can take questions at the very end. Let's give Ryne a hand for that.